Hi there. My name is Mia. Nice to meet you. Um, Ignore the three doors that I seem to have behind me. This is just the corner that I'm deciding to do this in. And if you do hear a fridge, it is running. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I can't remove the sound. I am going to do a review on A Complete Unknown, which is a new kind of biopic that came out recently that stars Timothy Chalamet. And it's by James Marigold. I hope that I'm right. James Mangold, not Marigold. Apologies, sir. Which he also co-wrote. So, kind of writer-director-ish. But I think the main reason I kind of started with this one is my whole thing at the moment, especially, is that the industry is in a very interesting kind of state where you have this streaming element. You have a kind of new versus old sense of cinema and film, and especially with something like a biopic. It's such a, like, every single year there's always a biopic on someone. There's enough famous people apparently where there's a biopic every year, and this year is no different. Yeah, I think the main thing that caught my eye with this is that, probably for my generation at least, is the promotion about it. So kind of taking a guy, Bob Dylan, people know him, people don't know him. It's kind of this like unknown guy from like the 60s, late 60s, 70s that was just kind of doing music. Known more by the older generations, known a little by the younger generations just by the genre or like the era. If you like music from this era, you'll know of this Bob Dylan geezer. So it's kind of a setup. You got a split of two different audiences basically. Don't mind me looking over there. Nothing's over there. No notes at all. Yeah, several audience. You've got an older audience that know it's from the era and is gonna tune in because they either remember the time or the music or the guy. And you have this younger audience that kind of knows a little bit about the time or the genre through the interest of the 60s, 70s or older music. And I know of this Bob Dylan character, I know of the songs but don't know of the man, which is probably what the portion that I am in as a generation audience is probably going in with. Then you bring in the casting, and you bring in kind of the actor of our generation, which is Timothy Chalamet, and you're putting him in as a lead role in a biopic. A biopic role is kind of like not a coming of age, but it is in a way for like a big actor to kind of play someone big for their career. It's like one of those things. Everyone kind of does it, allegedly. So for him, it kind of bringing this guy solidifies the younger audience interest because he has a huge fan base, even from like very young, like maybe late teenagers that are just obviously because he's just an attractive young man in the media. And then you also have, the older generation that maybe grew up on his films when they were younger, a bit like Call Me By Your Name, the rise of like A24 or things like that. Like, they're going to know this Timothy Chalamet guy. So you've got engagement for a younger audience that's going to help in them actually showing up to the theatre. If they know they like the actor, they're going to actually turn up. From there, the promo itself that at least I saw before I saw the film was kind of focused around him as a person, like Timothy Chalamet as an actor, not really about Bob Dylan. Maybe because this kind of marketing or the promo was targeted for my audience range, I didn't receive the memo for other forms of marketing. Like, I saw a poster here and there, and I saw a trailer every so often, but like not as frequent as bigger blockbuster kind of movies. It was kind of more kind of microdosed, what a word, into my day-to-day more through probably like internet celebrities. So there was a interview with this internet celebrity Brittany Broski, really struggling with that name, where she's just having an interview one-to-one with this guy. His red carpet walks dressed crazy, or dressed like Bob Dylan has previously. So kind of taking the mick of it more. It's not very serious, which I think is what people like in the younger audiences, where it's a serious enough movie as a biopic, but the marketing doesn't have to be that. Him as a celebrity came more present when this movie was coming out. So the promo, at least to engage the younger audience, was just this guy. But apart from that, there was still I still witnessed more traditional forms. I used to saying more traditional forms of promotion, so like posters, posters by the tube, posters on a bus, trailers, you're on YouTube, you're watching TV, they're still kind of floating around. Additional schemes are still there. And it's still like a successful tactic for more of an older audience that's not going to be engaging in pop culture or social media in more of a constant way, but still engaging with the audience they still want to attract, which is a slightly older one. So moving on to the plot of the film, I think it was a pretty decent biopic. Biopics as they come are hard because you've got a lot of people to please. You know, you got the person himself, the family, the fan base, the people you're trying to engage in the story. From the beginning, it was clear that Bob Dylan was quite involved in this, which does make that part kind of easier. But I thought, you know, for a biopic, it did all the right did all the boxes. Telling the story, the casting's very good. The biopic itself was based off a book, and the whole film kind of takes place prior to Dylan's big release of his album that like is one of his best albums of all time, or put in one of the best lists of all time. So before not necessarily his big break, but his major cultural importance kind of break as an artist, at least. Overall, it is long, and that may be because I'm getting younger, my attention span is shortening, as the data say. But yeah, over 2 hours is quite a lot. The pace doesn't change too much. There's only very short amounts of time of quite intense things happening. Nothing major is happening a lot. It's more just kind of holding your hand through the story, almost as if like your grandparents telling you a tale, and they're kind of walking you through step by step. This time with everything happens in kind of chronological order. We don't really ever go back. There's no flash forward or flashback. It's all just straight through. I think the first half was probably the stronger half, while we're in the 60s and we're seeing him come up. Because I think in the character you're seeing more of a struggle clearly, where he's growing in his skill or his music, and everyone's starting to realise that he's good and he's beginning to get his big break, and it's all kind of taking place. And then the second half, we see him already kind of established in the beginning of the 70s, where the woman that he first kind of fell in love with, Sylvie, he's no longer with, because obviously he's just not that kind of guy, as we'll pick up later about like kind of Bob's character in the film. There's this whole sense of old versus new, and then tradition versus change, which I think you get quite clearly when we jump into this new stage of life where Bob is kind of really wanting something different or wanting something new, and he's stuck in this American folk kind of genre. And from the beginning, he's always very anti-genre, which he's very clear from from what he says or in dialogue. The genre that he starts off in, which is the American folk music, there's a big sense of, as you can see from the film, a sense of tradition, and a link to like Christianity, old American values, that kind of thing. And as he moves into like the early 70s, moving into different genres, trying new things, there's like rock elements. His interest in like Johnny Cash and what he kind of has this like, he's kind of fighting between the two kind of sides of what people want, and this whole thing is he doesn't want to live how other people want him to, basically, which I think is cool, very cool, especially in reflection of the current times where you have this whole thing of in music where people don't want to be put into boxes of genre, because it obviously like limits artists, which has been talking about they talk about it now. They've been talking about it for years, and they still talk about it now. So it still resonates, and it still kind of holds up in that sense of tradition versus old, that whole fight against the past and the future. The next section that I'm talking about is, I think Bob Dylan as a character, as a protagonist in the film. So he's just very nonchalant. You know, he never wants to be put in a box or put out of his comfort, in the sense of doing something he doesn't want to do, which I think is not a bad thing for a person. But this happens to him both romantically and musically. So in basically every part of his life, he doesn't want to have an expectation of him or be held back. I think it might be Bob's character as the protagonist is the kind of the least depth in it, or there's the least change that happens for him. He kind of is the same guy, it seems, throughout, without much changing him necessarily majorly. He's always been about anti-genre, and he's always been just about the music. And it's kind of clear throughout that that's what he is. Nothing's really changed him. He's either just kind of got a bit lost, but his morals have kind of stayed the same, which kind of makes it hard for you to connect with him as a protagonist. I know that Bob Dylan is very involved in it, so it could be this, you're lacking maybe the edge that you would want if you're the person that you'll do this biopic on is so involved. You don't want to show a bad side of the character. And there's bad sides, but not really faults. It's faults without there being any change in the character. He doesn't learn anything, it feels like, from this. He learns to just do what he wants to do. But that's kind of it. Whereas everyone else around him seems to learn a lot more than he does. Where Sylvie learns you can't fight if someone's like, you can't fight for someone to love you. Joan kind of learns that he's probably not the one for her for like an actual relationship. Pete Seeger learns that you can't fight change. They seem to all learn, and he doesn't really. He just seems to be the pusher of the change. But he himself doesn't change. Whereas the others, you seem to be more concerned for them, or for like Sylvie watching Joan get off with Bob Dylan on stage, or this whole, you're watching that and you're feeling compassion for them, but for Bob you're not really feeling that much. He's just there as this kind of consistent thread through the story. Very, very good casting. Looks wise, I think, especially for Bob Dylan's character, Timothy does a decent job. It's not exactly him, but he's close enough in the face. Joan Baez's character by Monica Barbaro, very good casting. Pete Seeger, played by Edward Norton, is really, really good. He plays this really nice kind of at times, paternal figure in the film. He's kind of this like middleman. He's all about making everyone happy and keeping the peace and getting everyone what they want, even if they both don't want the same thing. He meets, obviously, Bob Dylan while he is caring for Woody Guthrie, which is obviously a legend in the American folk music kind of stage. And Pete Seeger's already a quite established folk musician, but he's based in the bounds of tradition. And the whole thing of this Newport Festival, which is the main kind of catalyst in having this change take place, is they're very strict on their American folk tradition because of what the genre kind of represents, this whole working man dialogue. Johnny Cash's character is very, very good in this movie. The casting's crazy for that because I did not even recognise Boyd Holbrook in there. Obviously, his casting's very good. He completely is that character. And then he goes against Pete Seeger so much, where Johnny Cash is this kind of wildish musician, does what he wants, drinks what he wants, kind of is almost like a different path that Bob Dylan can kind of follow down from. Bob kind of wants to be the best of both of those two in the end, but in his own way. But he's kind of the middle ground between them. The last Newport Festival concert, the last performance Bob does, where he tries out this new material, you have this whole frantic fight between the American Folk Committee and you have Pete Seeger there, where they're kind of fighting to, obviously Bob Dylan's getting heckled and throws stuff on stage. It's very mixed. Some people love it, some people are cheering, some people are booing, but he's still performing, and they're basically running around trying to turn the music off. There's like a bit of a physical fight or whatever, but what's really good is you have Pete Seeger's character, who's known to be he's a good guy, goody two-shoes good guy, does everything by the book, and he is also trying to go over there and sort this out, and you have this interaction with his wife, who kind of works as this kind of quiet kind of moral stone, even for him, or his version of moral stone, where he, for a lot of people, would be the moral stone. His wife is his own version, where he's kind of desperate to try and stop this from happening, and he looks at this, it's like a wire board basically that's connected to the equipment that's for the festival, and obviously he's looking at trying to shut it down, and he's about to sees an axe in the background, and it's the first time you're going to see this character actually contemplate something that isn't logistical or isn't compassionate or isn't level-headed, and you see his wife just cutting straight away and kind of put that to bed. It's kind of nice to see a character act out of character in an emotion in this movie just a little bit. Like, it's nice to have that, to know that everyone's not just super plain sailing. There is people going to act a bit erratically who are more by the book kind of characters, which it was a really good scene in that sense, just to have. I think that's the only time probably in that movie someone really acts out of character given a frantic situation. Overall, I'd say the biopics, it's pretty good, it's enjoyable, it knows what it is. They're good performances, but there's nothing that you are nothing that's amazed. It's quite a passive viewing experience. It's not too, I'm not fighting against it, I'm just kind of riding along the wave of it, which I think is what is meant for. I think it knows what it is. I don't think it's trying to be more than that and change your life in the way you view things. It's more just going to give you the experience of this time in music in someone's life. It's not like a crazy, eye-opening view of what people don't already know. Having the actors sing as their characters helps a lot more. Having them sing well, even better, especially for a biopic. There has been some previously that it doesn't really work for. I remember there was a film released, which is the Amy Winehouse biopic, that wasn't that well received from the actor or from the singing part, because obviously they have a very distinct voice. It's hard to kind of replicate that, whereas Bob Dylan has a slightly distinct voice, but enough where it can be kind of mimicked without too much like leeway in it being right or wrong. Very good mix of kind of higher profile stars like Edward Norton and Timothée Chalamet in the sense of bringing the big box office names to the film, as well as having a good kind of range of more TV series stars like Boyd Holbrook that's been in different series like Narcos and things. It brings two different consumers of media together, which again looks good on the distribution front in the sense of making the money back in theatres. The film itself was premiered in LA at the Adobe Theatres in December 10th, and then 15 days later on Christmas Day it was distributed out by Searchlight Pictures. Currently it's said to have grossed I think around $127.2 million, which kind of looks compared to its around 60 mil budget. So successful financially in a way. They have made profit. For the film, obviously after it's kind of made, it was quite clear as biopics kind of run, the award season run was expected. I think that's one of the main reasons I picked this one, is because of how many biopics, or at least biopics as a film genre, are expected to be received by award season. At least, especially for the Academy Awards, like 21 biopics have been won for Best Picture, 28 Best Actors wins, and then 18 Best Actress wins, and then supporting actors and actress win as well. Like, it's kind of like at least over the last like 50 years or so, there's been an expectation around biopics and how they're received award season. For this time, it didn't really hit the mark, and it kind of shows you kind of the current climate of the industry in a way. So, you know, there was a SAG win for Chalamet for his acting, but still, he was the youngest to win it, but still there wasn't an Oscar win. There was a nomination, but not a win. I mean, the reason I picked this film more specifically, as I kind of mentioned before, or touched upon briefly before, was the sense of how it kind of presents more of an industry shift, or the current climate shift of the in and out kind of diaspora, where you have there's a whole conversation around things being in and out in the industry, where industry productions like biopics or big box office hits being one kind of in or out, one weighing scale, and then the independent filmmaker of more smaller budget films with obviously an independent edge having one weighing scale, and it kind of weighing up and down like this every so often, depending on how much saturation there is of one or the other. And from this one, it kind of tells you a bit more about what's in and what's out, basically. So at least what I took from this was at least for this award season, there was a more interest and focus on more independent film productions. Like, you had films like Anora, films like The Last Shogun, which had such a big buzz and interest online and with younger audiences, in the sense of it being a different kind of story. It's more unique. There's not a big budget behind it. It's more focused on story and narrative, rather than there being an already kind of established and catered to production, like a biopic or a big box office hit. They're always going to do well because there's always been an audience for it, but they are not doing as well as they used to. I just kind of, for this one, I want to see a film that I feel like is quite traditional in the way that it is presented and formulated to the audience, or told in this very linear, chronological biopic story of a musician from a period era biopic that a couple years ago would have been a straight run for all of the awards, now kind of holding itself in more of a modern film industry landscape where there's so many forms of independent film coming up, and it's so much more accessible to have how they're kind of fighting off against each other, or like battling off to see which is better received. And from this you can kind of look into things like distribution as well. Obviously it's a different landscape, you have streaming services now too. This film itself was distributed by Starlight Pictures, which is now owned by Disney. So there's already a rumor that it's going to go to Hulu, but it makes more sense kind of, for me at least, to go Disney Plus. It's more of a landscape where it can kind of hold its own in the space. They have the sense of it's a musical film, so the music background will help with Disney's kind of image. Nothing too crazy takes place. There's a slight hint on alcohol and drugs, but nothing crazy. It's still quite family friendly enough where I think it could work in that streaming platform a lot better, where it can be promoted. In comparison to Netflix, I feel like it will probably get... Netflix is such a big streaming service, and it's like the mother basically of all of them. But Netflix has so much on there of different forms from different eras or different types of media. It's kind of like the Google of streaming services, where it literally does everything for you. It caters to every audience. It probably end up getting lost, and it wouldn't receive enough grossing or enough numbers or viewership on that platform as it would on Disney. Similar kind of goes for Amazon Prime, where it has a lot more independent, smaller features. It probably do slightly better than Netflix, where it's more open to taking on independent film. It would kind of pop out more on the platform, but it's still, I don't think it would connect as well as the audience that it would want than it would on Disney. Basically, for me, my main shtick is kind of understand the landscape now in comparison to more traditional styles of film business planning, or how productions or products of film connect to consumers. That's like my whole thing. So for this one, it's very interesting where you can see they try and tap into a new version of audience, which is younger in the promotion. And then once the film is out and it's there and it's watched by the audience, how they can get that buzz to keep going and receiving it in from another audience, but streaming wise, because it's always quite a hard one to access, just because you can't always figure out who you're catering to, especially in certain age groups. Whereas streaming TV series and things like that is seen in a teen drama show is very straightforward, but for a film like this, you're unsure of how that kind of audience member where they're gonna be in the streaming service world, and who to align with to get the best results. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with this one. I can't imagine it will be Disney Plus. It seems like the smartest career move, just for the sense of the period biopic that has a musical element. Disney Plus seems to make more sense, and it will seem to blend in with the categories they have and the films they already have on there more than on other streaming services, where it probably would just end up getting lost and won't receive enough attention. That's all I have. I don't really know how to end this video. I hope it isn't too long. Sorry for that.